When I saw the list, I felt relief. I shouldn't have. A man had just died 30 meters from my pillow, and I was in a basement holding a list with our names written by an unknown hand. Relief wasn't the right emotion. But the right emotions stopped visiting me a long time ago. I felt relief because it meant I wasn't crazy, that the connection I had discovered after 20 years of sleepless nights, of maritime records and municipal archives and phone calls to strangers who hung up on me, that connection existed outside my head. Someone else had seen it. Someone else knew. The question was whether that someone was sitting with us at the table, or lying dead in the lantern room. I came up from the basement at 6 in the morning. I hadn't slept. I made coffee in the kitchen and waited. Martin was the first to come down. Without a word, he opened the fridge and started cooking. Eggs. Toast. The kitchen as a trench. Everyone survives with the tools they have. The others came down gradually. Celia, dressed and groomed as if heading to a conference. Inns, pale, with her camera turned off for the first time. Hugo, in the same jacket from the early hours, without a wrinkle. Lola didn't come down. I waited until they were all seated, until the coffee was in the cups. I wanted their hands occupied. Then I took the clippings from my jacket pocket and set them in the center of the table, between the plates and the teaspoons, like a bomb wrapped in newspaper. I think it's time we talked for real. Nobody touched the clippings at first. They looked at them the way you look at a dead animal in the road, with that mix of revulsion and fascination that precedes recognition. Celia was the first to reach out. She picked up the front page clipping. She read it slowly. And she set it on the table with a precision that reminded me of how she'd examined Roman's body, without trembling, without hesitating, with the terrible efficiency of someone who processed that information long ago. I knew it, she said. She closed her eyes. Opened them. I knew this was what it was about. The front page said what I had read 1,000 times. The Santa Lucia, a coastal fishing vessel based in Fisterra, sunk off the Cape in the early hours of the 15th of November. 6 crew members dead. An investigation that concluded in 3 weeks what should have taken months. Accident. Mechanical failure. Rough seas. Case closed. 6 men died, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I expected. Steadier than I deserved. The case was closed as an accident. But if we were invited here for this, if someone gathered us on the anniversary night, then someone believes it wasn't an accident. Hugo stood up. The movement was abrupt, the chair scraping against the stone floor with a screech that cut the air like a knife. What does this have to do with us? It wasn't a question. It was a defense. The front line of a trench Hugo riot had been building for 20 years. I watched the reactions. It's what I do. It's what I've done my whole life. Watch people and read what they don't say. Translate the silence. Martin had picked up the crew list. He read it with his lips pressed tight, moving them slightly, as if he was spelling out each name. I saw the exact moment he found the one he was looking for. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was a collapse. His shoulders dropped. His back curved. He sat down slowly, like a building coming down floor by floor, and set the paper on the table. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The name was there, Zos Largo, seaman. His father. Inns went pale. Not because of the dead. Because of the living. In one of the clippings, the one about the subsequent investigation, Manuel Fisterra was mentioned as the owner of the fishing fleet that included the Santa Lucia. Fisterra. Her surname. The surname she wore around her neck like a medal she never wanted to win. She didn't say anything either. But I watched her fingers close around the coffee cup until her knuckles turned white. Lola appeared in the kitchen doorway. I don't know when she'd come down. She was there, standing, hands crossed over her apron, looking at the clippings on the table the way someone looks at a grave they visit every day. She didn't look at them closely. She didn't need to. She knew them by heart. 6 men, I repeated. And 7 guests in this lighthouse. It's not a coincidence. It was never a coincidence. It was Celia who proposed going through Roman's things. If Roman knew something, and I think we all agree he knew something, it's possible he left some kind of record. We went up to his room. Not to the lantern, which was still locked. To the room where he'd slept, where his bed was still rumpled and his bottle still half full and his jacket still hanging from the back of the chair like a polite ghost waiting for someone to give it permission to leave. Innes searched the pockets with a photographer's hands, precise. In the inside pocket she found a digital recorder. Small. Black. The kind used by journalists who carry the profession in their bones even though the profession no longer wants them. She turned it on. The memory was empty. It's been erased, said Innes. Or someone erased it, said Celia. Martin took the recorder. He pressed buttons. He navigated through menus. The files have been deleted, but not overwritten. If no new files have been recorded on top of them, the data is still there. He worked for an hour. The rest of us waited in the common room, in a silence that weighed like water. Hugo read a book. Or pretended to. In an hour he didn't turn a single page. Martin came down with the recorder connected to a portable speaker of Innes's. I've recovered fragments. The quality is bad. But you can make it out. He pressed play. Static. Noise. And then, Roman's voice. Broken, thick, the voice of a man who has drunk too much and slept too little and spent too many years carrying something that doesn't fit inside his body. I've been carrying this for 20 years. 20 years. Sometimes I wake up at night and smell the salt spray and think I'm back in that newsroom, with the case documents on the table, and the fleet owner's voice on the phone telling me how much my silence cost. And me giving him a number. Giving him a number the way you order a coffee. Black. No sugar. Pause. The sound of a glass. Ice against crystal. Whiskey, I assumed. The owner paid. I collected. 6 families without answers. 6 women who became widows and 6 children who grew up without a father, and me with a new flat in Vigo and a newspaper column I never wrote again with the same hand. Because the hand that takes money isn't the same one that writes the truth. More static. A cut. Another fragment. I came to the lighthouse because someone invited me. I don't know who. But I know why. I know that someone knows. And part of me wants them to know. Wants them to look me in the face and tell me what I am. And then, lower, almost a whisper. A coward. That's what I am. A coward who accepted money in exchange for 6 lives. The recording cut out. Martin pressed more buttons. There was another fragment. Shorter. Roman's voice was different in this one. More alert, more lucid. As if he'd recorded it at another time. Perhaps hours before dying. I've tried to talk to her. The translator. I think she knows more than she's saying. I think she has the eyes of someone I knew a long time ago. Tomorrow I'll insist. Tomorrow I'll tell her everything. The silence that followed was the longest I've experienced outside this hospital room. 5 people sitting around a table, listening to the voice of a dead man who had wanted to speak and hadn't found anyone willing to listen. I had been that person. I had been the one who didn't listen. Celia stood up. She smoothed her jacket. She ran a hand through her hair. Small gestures of preparation, the gestures of someone who has made a decision and needs a second to wrap it in dignity before letting it go. Roman wasn't the only one who was paid. She said it looking at the window. At the sea that couldn't be seen behind the rain. 20 years ago I was commissioned to write an expert report on the sinking of the Santa Lucia. forensic psychologist at the Santiago Institute of Legal Medicine. They asked me to evaluate the testimonies. A simple case, they told me. An accident. All I had to do was confirm it. She turned toward us. But the testimonies didn't add up. Times that didn't match. Statements that contradicted each other. And when I wrote my real report, they called me. They told me there was a version that suited everyone, and that my job was to write that version. "And did you write it?" asked Martin. There was no accusation in his voice. Only exhaustion. "I wrote it. 6 families lost the chance to know the truth because I signed a paper that said the testimonies were consistent, that there were no signs of negligence, that the case could be closed." Pause. "I've had nightmares with 6 names every night for 20 years. I retired because I couldn't keep practicing justice when I myself had betrayed it." She let the silence settle. Then she looked at Hugo. "You were there too, weren't you? In some office? In some firm? Your face looks familiar to me in a way that isn't coincidence." Hugo didn't respond. Hugo never responded when the truth came too close. What happened next wasn't an investigation. It was a collapse. Hugo sat down and crossed his arms. His posture was that of a wall. This was 20 years ago. There's no point dredging it up. A man has died and we're trapped in a lighthouse. Let's focus on surviving the storm and let the authorities handle the rest. Reasonable. Always reasonable. Hugo was the most reasonable man in any room he was in. And reason, sometimes, is just the mask that cowardice wears. Ins hadn't spoken. She was sitting with the cold coffee cup between her hands, staring at a fixed point on the table. I wondered what she was calculating. Because Ins was always calculating, behind that camera, behind those young eyes that seemed to see more than they admitted. Martin broke the silence. "My father was on that boat." He said it with the voice of someone pronouncing a sentence aloud for the first time, though they've thought it 10,000 times. "Zos Largo. Seaman on the Santa Lucia. He was my father." He looked at his hands. "I grew up hearing he'd died in a fishing accident. That the sea took him. That he was a hero. 5 years ago I found out it wasn't an accident. And that my father wasn't a hero." "Did anyone know?" he asked. He looked at us one by one. "Did anyone here know my father was on that boat?" "No," I said. I lied. I knew the name of every crewman on the Santa Lucia. I knew their ages, their families, the names of their children. I knew that Zos Largo had a 2-year-old son who would become a cook because the only memories of his father were in a kitchen, frying sardines while singing tavern songs. I knew everything. And I lied. Lola rose from her chair without a sound. She walked to the door. And before leaving, without turning around, she said, "The sea doesn't forget. None of us do either. Stop pretending." She went up the stairs. Toward the lantern. Toward the only place in the lighthouse where she could be close to the sky and far from the shame. That night I went up to find Lola. The others had retreated to their rooms. Martin had cooked something nobody ate. Hugo had locked himself in as he did every night, as if the door to his room were an argument no one could rebut. Ins had disappeared with her camera, recording something or someone, always recording. I climbed the 112 steps. My legs already knew them the way you know a prayer you repeat until it loses meaning and becomes pure rhythm. The lantern key hadn't been turned. Someone had opened it. Lola. The door was ajar. Through the gap filtered an amber light that pulsed with the slow rotation of the lens. I pushed. Lola was kneeling in front of the Fresnel lens. The enormous lens of cut crystal that had guided ships for more than a century turned slowly, projecting its beam toward a sea that couldn't see it through the storm. And Lola was there, on her knees, hands together, murmuring. She wasn't praying. She was reciting names. Amoro Duval, Zos Largo, Manuel Rivas, Antonio Perez, Francisco Dios, Luis Insua. 6 names. The 6 crewmen of the Santa Lucia. She said them in order, slowly, with the cadence of a litany, and when she finished the last she started again with the first. A rosary of guilt with 6 beads. I didn't make a sound. But Lola knew I was there. She felt presences the way you feel changes in pressure, in the bones. She stopped murmuring. With her knees on the floor and the lens turning above her head, she said, "You're Amoro's daughter, aren't you?" It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. The way she said it told me it wasn't something she'd just discovered. She had known since she saw me arrive. Perhaps even before. "How did you know?" I asked. "You have his eyes." She stood up slowly. Her knees cracked. "I knew the moment I saw you get out of the taxi. You have Amoro's eyes. That blue that isn't quite blue, that has a bit of grey, like the sea when it doesn't know whether there'll be a storm or calm. Your father had those eyes. And I see them every night when I close mine. Lola." I turned off the light that would have saved your father. She said it the way you tell time. The way you say it's raining. The way you say things you've been thinking for so long they've stopped hurting and become the very structure of your body. I've been at this lighthouse for 20 years. Not out of love. Not out of habit. Because I can't leave the place where I killed them. The beam of the lens passed over us. A second of white light. Then darkness. "And I owe you 6 lives, she said. 6 lives I extinguished with a switch. 6 lives the sea took because I let the night go blind. I wanted to hate her. I'd rehearsed that hatred for 20 years. The woman who turned off the lighthouse. The murderer. But the woman standing before me wasn't a murderer. She was a mother who had chosen her son over 6 strangers. And she had spent 20 years paying with the only thing she had, her freedom." I said nothing. The words I'd prepared for 2 decades had become useless. Lola took my hands. Hers were cold and rough, toughened by salt and wind, hands that had turned the light that protects boats from the sea on and off 1,000 times. "Was it you?" she asked me. "Did you invite all of us?" I couldn't lie to her. To the others. Yes. To Hugo, to Martin, to Inns. But not to Lola. Not to the woman who had turned her entire life into a penance. Yes. Why? Because I wanted the truth. Lola nodded. She released my hands. She looked at the glass where, hours earlier, someone had scratched the words I could now read in reverse from inside. "The sea gives back what it is owed." "The truth," she repeated. "The truth is that your father was going to report the smuggling. And they killed him for it. And I helped. And that journalist helped cover it up. And that psychologist helped close the case. And that lawyer helped bury it." She looked at me. "And you dug it up." That night, after talking with Lola, I went back to my room. I sat on the bed. I stared at the wall. I had spent 20 years getting to that moment. Gathering the 7 pieces of the puzzle in one place. Forcing the truth out. And now that the truth was beginning to emerge, drop by drop, confession by confession, I didn't feel justice. I felt fear. Because Roman was dead. And I had brought him here. I had written his name on an invitation. I had chosen the date, the place, the words. To resolve what they left unfinished. As if resolving were a clean verb. As if the truth came without a price. Here in the hospital there's a window facing north. If I stand on tiptoe I can see a strip of sea between the buildings. Sometimes I stay like that for hours. On tiptoe. Watching the water. Waiting for the sea to give back something I don't know I've lost. Perhaps my sanity. Perhaps my innocence. Perhaps my father's eyes. In the lighthouse there remained 6 people, a corpse, and a secret that has just begun to bleed. Lola knows who I am. Roman knew who I was, and someone killed him before he could say it. Celia has confessed. Hugo has entrenched himself. And Martin and Inns are discovering their parents weren't who they believed. And I, who wanted to be the hand that uncovered the truth, am beginning to suspect that someone is using my plan against me. The next chapter will unlock when we reach 35. 35 people who know this story. Subscribe. Not because I ask you to, because there are truths that only survive if someone listens.